Pills, Poverty, and Pain, the Opioid Crisis and Poverty in Appalachia. The wonder is that you could start life with nothing, end with nothing, and lose so much in between. This quote from author Barbara Kingsolver's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, Demon Copperhead, conveys the reality of poverty and loss for so many in America's Appalachian region. Appalachia cries out for help as the rest of us write this area off as backwards and uneducated. This harmful stereotype leads to Appalachia being ridiculed and dismissed in popular culture, media, and most importantly, in political action and aid. Almost 14.3% of Appalachia lives below the poverty line, which is higher than the national average. An Appalachian native herself, Kingsolver's novel paints a distinct picture of what the quality of life is like for many families in Appalachia, struggling with the burdens of substance abuse, generational poverty, and harmful stereotypes. Because of the rampant drug culture and opioid addiction, coupled with the legacy of coal mining companies and their monopolies, Appalachia finds itself experiencing widespread and crippling poverty across the region. As stated in a study done by the Appalachian Regional Commission in 2017, citing information from the CDC, the number of overdose deaths in the United States involving opioids has quadrupled since 1999. The introduction of opioids and their lasting effect on the region are top contributor to the poverty, addiction, and death plaguing the region. Accountability and aid are in order for addicts in Appalachia. It's important to acknowledge the history of exploitation by large corporations that moved into Appalachia and took advantage of its people, to understand the current drug issues and prevalence of addiction that lead to and exacerbate poverty. Appalachian towns have long been dominated by coal mining companies. These coal companies were in control of everything from the houses they rented and the schools where they sent their children to the churches in which they prayed and the graveyards where they would be buried. There was no opportunity to stray from the norm, that being coal mining. In some towns, coal companies even paid their employees in a special form of coal currency that was only accepted at pre-approved coal corporation-owned stores, furthering the cycle of control these companies had on the everyday lives of Appalachians. Because these companies wanted to maintain a robust workforce in the mines, they invested little in education, as one did not need a college or sometimes even high school level education to work as a miner. Even after King Coal has come and gone, public schools are severely underfunded in Appalachia, constructing yet another hurdle for young people to overcome as they aim to avoid poverty and do better than those before them. As described by an article in the Columbia Political Review, this prolonged underinvestment in education has resulted in a workforce that is inept to work outside the mines or blue-collar industry. Coal corporations left a legacy of undervaluing education, further harming a region riddled with addiction and poverty. Throughout the coal era, dependency on coal companies for basic necessities became an unfortunate reality. Along with working in the mines came terrible dangers. Mine collapses crushed workers, odorless methane and carbon monoxide gas asphyxiated them. Rockwall blasting blinded them, gruesome machine accidents maimed them, and explosions of flammable gas incinerated them. Anxiety and depression surrounding this stressful way of life brought on by working as, or being the loved one of, a coal miner accompanied the physical pain and suffering of this job. Coal camp doctors began to prescribe opioids liberally to combat the pain of physical and mental ailments. As coal companies also controlled the medical side of society and employed all these physicians to maintain the mining labor force, they dispensed drugs to get miners back into the mines. When Oxycontin entered the drug market with its predisposition to prescription drugs, Appalachia was the perfect target for pharmaceutical companies seeking to exploit and profit off of vulnerable populations. Companies such as Big Pharma used deceptive marketing and empty promises to sell opioids and painkillers to Appalachians. The company's representatives told doctors that Oxycontin was not addictive primarily because of its slow release properties. This was not the case. Generational addiction and substance abuse coupled with minimal resources for recovery led to widespread opioid addiction and thus perpetuated poverty. In an interview conducted by Sally Sadel of National Affairs, Richard Fisher of Ironton, Ohio, is realistic about his town. Drugs are the economy here, he says. You either sell them, buy them, or treat people for abusing them. As Fisher suggests, drugs, and opioids specifically, have become so profitable that everyone is in the business of them, so to speak. In other regions, doctors prescribed opioids more sparingly, usually just for terminal pain and cancer. But in Appalachia, By the year 2000, medications for chronic pain relief had become a booming industry. The sheer volume of opioid prescriptions contributed to an environment in which patients could easily abuse their prescriptions or find pills without a prescription. Because the opioid pills were in such demand and had such high street value, they even occasionally served as currency. In some towns, paying for gas, a meal, or even rent could be done through drugs. As more and more Appalachians become addicted to opioids, the cultural acceptance of drug use increases and only leads to further accessibility of pills and more addiction. As demonstrated in the study done by anthropologist Philippe Bourgeois in Search of Respect, which focuses on how addiction and poverty are devastating the Puerto Rican populations of El Barrio and East Harlem, New York, drug addiction often leads to child neglect, domestic abuse and violence, crime, and challenges in obtaining or keeping employment. These substance-related themes, along with suicide and overdose, are highlighted in Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead, as she tells the story of a young boy named Damien. Substance abuse plagues his family, friends, and personal life as he attempts to navigate the hardships that come with simply growing up in Appalachia. Kingsolver also paints a vivid picture of pill mills, described as bogus pain clinics posing as legitimate pain management centers. With the emergence of these clinics, those seeking opioids simply have to claim something as small as back pain and get a signature from a doctor or someone pretending to be one in order to either perpetuate their own addiction or sell the pills to others for a profit and perpetuate the addiction of those around them. In recent years, laws and regulations have begun to crack down on opioid use and prescription. Pill mills have been busted, doctors prosecuted, and overall many painkillers removed from the Appalachian equation. Despite what might seem like positive progress, rates of drug addiction and overdoses in Appalachia have not slowed. New addiction and methods of feeding them have formed. In fact, the opioid crisis has grown across the country since 2015, particularly with the emergence of more powerful synthetic opioids, such as fentanyl. In the past few years, there has been a notable shift in Appalachian drug use from prescription painkillers to illegal drugs. Prosecutors are dealing with a new set of challenges as heroin and the synthetic opioid fentanyl are imported to Appalachian towns. There's also been a spike in the use of methamphetamine since prescription painkillers have been more heavily regulated lately. Observers from outside Appalachia may argue that so many in the region are experiencing poverty and an extremely low quality of life due to the choices they have made and by fault of their own. They claim there is always the option to not take the drugs, not sell them, not prescribe them, to leave your abusive family environment, or to move away from college and never come back. In her interview, Kingsolver complicates this view with the simple phrase, "This is not our fault." She explains how the destructive legacy of exploitative industries such as coal companies and drug developers leave less room for choice in the matter than one might think. Somewhere in the middle of Kingsolver's view and that of outside observers seems like a practical place to land. Coal companies did control all aspects of life for decades, focusing only on profit, leaving hardworking people with lung cancer, amputated limbs, and mental illness. Although there is always choice when it comes to substance abuse and addiction, pharmaceutical companies understood the history of liberal opioid prescription and physical pain from blue-collar work in Appalachia. They preyed upon the next generation with the development of Oxycontin, leaving the population more susceptible than other regions to patterns of generational addiction and despair. Additionally, many parts of the region don't have access to quality medical care, or even hospitals and doctors at all. In her interview in July of 2025, Kingsolver mentions that cuts to Medicaid would make this problem even worse, leading to hospital closures and the worsening health of Americans in this region. Another important problem that contributes to blaming solely Appalachians for their own substance abuse and poverty is our general attitude in America towards addiction. She explains that we see addiction as a moral failing, when we should see it as a disease and treat it as such. Nobody kicks a cancer patient out of the house like they do an addict. Society doesn't leave an ALS-afflicted man homeless on the streets to figure out a solution on his own like we do an addict. One of the most important ways to stop generational addiction and in turn help alleviate poverty in Appalachia is to re-examine our mindset about blame when it comes to substance abuse and understand the history of extreme exploitation in the region. Perhaps there is a way to recognize there is choice and blame in becoming addicted to drugs in Appalachia, while also not leaving those addicted abandoned and without aid, and thus perpetuating the problem. Programs such as drug courts, in which a person arrested on drug-related charges with no prior violent record avoids jail time by seeing a judge and doing drug tests on a regular basis, seems like a way people can be held accountable and simultaneously be helped. For those who have repeated offenses of drug-related crimes with no clear intent of getting clean, especially those who have continued to harm others in the process, more serious punishment and jail time are justified. Additionally, accountability should extend beyond the region. Just as addicts and prescribers who break the law with their illegal drug activity should be held responsible for their actions, so should Purdue Pharma as the proponent of addiction and provider of millions of opioids for years. As a large corporation, they have an abundance of money and resources. Part of those resources could fund recovery houses and clinics for addicts across Appalachia and begin to rectify the harm this company has inflicted on millions. There is an entire region in America falling behind starkly in education, economic mobility, mental and physical health, and opportunity. Appalachia needs America's help, yet we dismiss the poor Appalachian child as an ignorant hillbilly, likely to end up grappling with opioid addiction as those before him. In a large part due to the pain and exploitation caused by large coal companies, pharmaceutical corporations, and the ongoing opioid crisis, Appalachia struggles today with widespread poverty and addiction.